This is course number 2 of the fall 2022 Mac for the Blind online series, and this is all about iOS basics. At this point, I think a lot of us, there are a lot of people at this stage that are using iPhones, iPads pretty successfully. So I'm going to be jumping around a little bit, but this is really going to focus on a lot of the iOS basics that sometimes go under the radar, especially when you self-teach yourself. There are aspects to the device and the software that you kind of miss because it's just not obvious or it's not something you're really paying attention to. So obviously we're at iOS 16. It was just released a few weeks back. Every year, Apple tends to release a new version of the iPad, iPhone, Apple Watch, Apple TV, Mac. Well, basically all of their devices, the HomePods, they all get some sort of a yearly update. Whether you agree with this or disagree, like I tend to kind of fall on the side of I wish they would not do a yearly cycle and maybe go to a bi-yearly. Only because I think doing a yearly cycle really creates more bugs and unresolved bugs than it does fix things. And I understand they want to add more features. They want to make things current. They want to really compete with, with Google and Microsoft, et cetera, and that's fine. That's fine. But, by doing so, you are kind of making problems for yourself. So iOS 16 came about and there were some, different changes. And some people are going to disagree with me, so I don't mean to offend, but I know there was a big thing about there being the Eloquence voices now available for iOS and the Mac. I have no idea why that's such an exciting thing. I think the Eloquence voices are terrible. I've never liked them with JAWS. In fact, I switched them right away to something different. But again, to each his or her own. They try to add more things as we go along here. So I'm going to touch on stuff here little by little. One of the new things too is the home screen and how you can customize your home screen on your iPhone. So for example,
weather 48 degrees, sunny, high 48 degrees, low of 33 degrees.
So I have on my home screen the weather widget, which basically will show me, the weather from my given area. I'm in East Amherst, New York, near Buffalo, so that's why it's so chilly today. Believe it or not, by Saturday it's going to be up in the mid 70s here. Very crazy weather. But you can put different widgets, different pieces of information.
Weather 48 degrees,
like
sunny.
To have it, included on your home screen. That's something new in iOS 16. I don't know, again, I'm not going to assume for anybody, but, I don't know what types of information people are going to put on their home screen. To me, the weather was the most important thing. I was going to put something with calendar to show the latest reminders, but I already have that on my watch. So I really didn't, the latest, my next client, I should say. But I already have that on my watch, and I didn't really want to just keep cluttering my screen. Now, if you have notifications, I'm sure those of you who are experienced iPhone and iPad users.
Weather, AQI, weather, do not disturb button, show notifications button.
So I have do not disturb on because I'm working with you guys and don't want text messages, etc. But on your home screen, on the lock screen, I should say, you're going to see notifications listed. And again, you can customize how you want the notifications to show. I prefer the individual style of the past, but you can stack them, you can hide them. There's different ways you can customize what, how you want these notifications to appear on your lock screen. I tried this stack, and what happens is you double tap on the stack to expand it and listen for as you flick to the right or slide your finger to the right. but I just found it, I like the old style. I just like to see all my notifications listed out in a row in the order they came in. Well, I mean, they still kind of bunch them, like, for example, MLB, NHL, news, etc. But still, I like to see the individual notifications come in. So I'm just going to
Face ID. Messages. 1 up.
So I have Face ID on my phone. I know this is a big topic of controversy among some blind people. I've been contacted by both current clients and people who are not my clients, but are just friends of mine or know me through the various lists. And it's interesting, the love-hate relationship that I guess is developed with Face ID. There is a segment of the blind population that think you can't set up Face ID on your own and that it's useless. I can tell you from personal experience, this is now my third phone that I've used or set up, or fourth phone, whatever it is, that I've set up Face ID completely independently. It is really not that difficult to set up if you pay attention and you sit down in a chair and you keep the phone in front of you level. And, I kept it basically at chest, stomach level. And I just obeyed the instructions. When it told me to turn my head slightly to the right, I slowly turned my head to the right. And I just kept my head perfectly still. I turned off the attention thing and the accessibility for Face ID. So it took me 2 times this last time with this with this iPhone 14 Pro I just got a few weeks ago. But I was able to set up Face ID again all by myself. I did not need sighted assistance. And once you have it set up, it's a simple trick. You just, again, you keep the phone steady. I keep it at chest, stomach level, and I just look straight down at the phone, and 9 times out of 10, it unlocks. And all I got to do is the home gesture, which brings me to one of the things that, the basic gestures, the one that has kind of been added to the arsenal of basic gestures for those of you who don't have home buttons, is the home gesture. And again, this is a point of contention among some blind people. For some reason, there was this air of panic
Screen
when
dimmed.
they
Calendar. Tuesday.
removed, when they removed the home button from the iPhone 10, the 10R, etc. There are still blind people I know, clients and former clients and just friends, who have stuck with getting the SEs, the SE2, the newest SE, or staying with the iPhone 8 over the years simply because they're afraid of not having a home button. I kind of find that silly personally. The home gesture is not difficult to do. You also can set up the back tap in VoiceOver so that you can tap the back of your phone 2 quick times, and that will take you home. You can also say to Siri, home, and she'll take you home. So, if you can't master the home gesture, there is other ways around that. So I don't, the fear of getting a phone that doesn't have a home button, to me, just has never made sense to me personally. It took me 10 minutes to figure out how to do the home gesture, and I'm just going to kind of talk about that for a moment. And it really comes down to your listening skills. So I'm going to mute my speech here for a moment.
Speech off.
So you can hear the actual sound effects. So what happens with the home gesture is you touch the very bottom of your screen and you listen for a little funk, a little like popping sound. If I can get it to. If you hear that little pop, pop. When you hear that sound, that tells you the gesture is ready. And then you slide your finger straight up the screen, not as fast as a swipe, but not as slow as dragging an item on the screen. You want to kind of get, like I call it, an intermediate speed. And you're going to listen for an additional 2 second and third pop. The second pop signifies you've reached the ability to go home. If you lift your finger from the screen at that point, the phone will go back to the home screen. If you keep sliding your finger up to the second pop and lift, that will take you to your app switcher. So if you heard those, oops, let me just, come on. So you hear those little pops. I don't know how they're coming through over the speaker, but if I lifted my finger after that first pop, takes me home. You heard the little home sound. If I kept going to the second pop, then I would go into the app switcher. So it's really just getting the pace of the gesture and just sliding your finger straight up. Don't get confused between the pop sounds and the little thunk thunk sounds that you hear. These sounds, that's not the same. That's just the sounds of sliding over the icons. So you want to listen for those little pop sounds, and they even kind of increase a little bit in tone as you go up the scale. Now, just as a side note, if you touch the status bar and then you come down with that gesture, you get the popping at the top of the screen, and you come straight down. The first pop will put you into the notification section. If you keep coming down for the second pop, that will put you into the control center. So you can do the reverse gesture from the top to the bottom. So it really, it just takes practice. I know the first few times, and even though you might practice as you can just hear me, you're still going to mess up a little bit. Sometimes it's just the speed of the gesture. It's the way I'm holding my phone. As I'm sure you veteran iPhone users and iPad users know, there is rhyme or reason to your home screen. It's actually broken up into 3 parts. The top is your status bar. Now,
Do not. A white crescent do not disturb. Cellular 4 VOS RXD7Z 100% battery power. Not charging. Status bar item.
okay.
Swipe down with 3 fingers to reveal notifications.
Sure. So when you're in the status bar, this is where you can go to the control center, or I should say notification or control center, by doing either your 3 finger swipe down to go to notifications, or you can do your 3 finger swipe up to put you into the control center. Now, the one thing I point out to my clients that's kind of special, besides the fact that the status bar shows up on every page of your home screen icons, it's also kind of a sandbox in that you're stuck in it. If you use the flicking gesture,
100, 100, 100, 100, 100.
You notice
100.
I can't flick out of the status bar. If I go back in the other
100%
direction,
VOS cellular. Do not disturb. 117 p.m.
I get
Status
that
bar
little
item.
thunk thunk sound. So you do kind of get stuck in the status bar, and you literally have to take your finger and
Health iTunes Store.
put it someplace else on the middle of the screen to get yourself extricated from the status bar. Now, at the very bottom of the screen,
Dock music.
you have
Double
your
tap
dock.
to open.
Now, just like the status bar, the dock shows up regardless of how many pages of icons you have. So the status bar and the dock are kind of special in that they don't change. So there's typically 4 apps that come in an iPhone dock.
Safari.
You usually
mail,
have
5 phone.
phone,
Double tap mail 500
mail,
Safari.
music. I've
Double
seen
tap to
things
open.
changed with some new iPhones where messages is in there and mail is not in the dock. But the point is you'll have 4 apps, and you can move apps around. If you want to make sure you have the best apps, the apps that you most frequently use in your dock, you can certainly move things out and move things in. For example, I've worked with clients who don't really do music on their iPhone, so they'll move the music icon out and they'll put messages or contacts or something they do use. Sometimes they stick third-party apps in there like Seeing AI or Be My Eyes for easy access. Now, the actual home screen itself, the basic layout is 4 rows. I should say 5 rows and 4 columns. So you have 4 icons across each row.
Messages. 1 unread message.
I'm just going to
double tap to open. Camera. Messages. 1 calendar. 2 clock. 1 9 photos. Double tap to open.
I just slid my finger. I used the slide gesture from left to right, and I went across the 4 icons. So I'm going to go back.
Messages. 1
now
messages.
I'm just going to go
1 unread
straight
message.
down.
Camera. Reminders. Watch. Home. Blindness apps folder. 8 apps.
Now I added
double tap to open.
6th row to mine, which is folders. But generally speaking, you have 5 rows with the 4 columns across. Now, one of the things I do sort of suggest to beginners, and again, we probably have a mixed bag of veteran users and beginners, so I'm not trying to insult anybody's intelligence here. But one of the things I do suggest is moving some of the icons from this page to your back page that you're not going to use, to make it easier to find those apps that you do want to use on a regular basis. The screen can kind of be very cluttered for a beginner. So sometimes if you lessen the number of icons on this front page, you can make life a lot easier. And then, later on, as you get more comfortable, and maybe there'll be other apps you'll download and you'll want to put on the front page and make available right away to you. So that's entirely up to you. And moving apps around from the VoiceOver perspective is, excuse me, really not that difficult. I'll get into that in a little bit, just to kind of do a kind of a semi demonstration, because I really don't want to move anything around on my phone at the moment, but I'll just let you hear the steps that would be involved. But I just first want to go over the two navigation gestures that I teach people. And I've kind of just given you sort of a taste of the first one, which is the slide gesture, where you just kind of slide your finger around. Now, the best way to do the slide gesture is not to be haphazard. In other words, you want to be very precise. You want to go left to right, right to left, up or down. You want to learn the layouts. I call the slide gesture a mapping gesture. I like my clients to understand the layouts of their home screen when they jump into a new app they might not be familiar with. And you want to kind of know where the real important buttons or controls or areas of the screen happen to be. You use that slide gesture to carefully map out what each app and each screen. So, and that kind of helps you, if you have the good visualization skills, to know where you are if you think you've gotten lost or you just randomly touch a part of the screen. So, for example, I don't expect anybody to know the layout of their home screen. Like, I couldn't recite to you exactly what order my icons are in, but I know where about certain things are. So if I just randomly go
health, double tap to open.
Okay, and I land on the health app, I know I'm towards the bottom of my screen. If I wanted to get to my finance folder, for example, I could just flick a few times.
Fitness, news, home, settings, Apple apps, extras folder, blindness apps folder, finance folder, 10 apps.
So it doesn't take me long to get to my finance folder where I have all my banking apps that I use. Now, flicking is kind of it's an interesting gesture to me, because I've encountered a lot of blind people that never use it. And I've encountered some blind people that don't think they think it's a worthless gesture and it doesn't work on blah, 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 blah. To me, flicking is the most efficient way to get through screens, particularly the accessible screens, your home screens, all the app screens of the stock apps that come with your phone. Yes, I understand sometimes in third-party apps, flicking can trip you up a little bit. If it's not a well-designed third-party app, the flicking gesture sometimes hits boundaries that you don't notice until you use the slide gesture to sort of figure that out. And again, I am not at all trying to dissuade or denigrate the slide gesture. What I'm saying is that you want to use both gestures to learn the layouts and screens and then maneuver yourself quickly. So the flicking gesture is simply using one finger and you're flicking straight across the screen, either left to right or right to left, as if you are brushing a piece of stubborn dust from the glass. So when I teach new clients, I advise them to use the boundaries, the left edge or the right edge of the screen to start. So in other words, you touch the left edge of the screen, reminders, and then you flick straight across.
iTunes Store, App Store, Contacts, Watch. Double tap to open.
Backwards, you go to the right edge and you come across.
Contacts, App Store, iTunes Store, reminders. Double tap to open.
Moving to the right works your way sequentially down towards the bottom of the screen, icon by icon. Flicking to the left moves you backwards towards the top of the screen. I equate it to, if those of you who are familiar with the term of leapfrogging, I grew up in a suburban sort of neighborhood. One of my friends, behind his house, there's what's called the Greenbelt Trail. It's a big nature trail. There's a pond, and to cross into the next development where another friend of ours lived, you could easily cut across the pond instead of having to walk the 4 or 5 blocks by street. Now, the trick with the pond was there was 4 stones that you had to step across so you wouldn't get your feet wet, especially if it was a wet season, if you had a lot of rain or etc., or if the pond was icing up and things like that. Now, yeah, as a blind guy, it was quite interesting. But when you're a kid, you don't think about those things. You just do what everybody else does. So all you really had to do was step from stone to stone to stone to stone. And that's basically what flicking does. It's basically going from icon to icon. And if you get the gesture down really well, you can,
iTunes, help, fit, edit, new, Apple Apps
you can
folder,
really
6 apps.
fly
Double tap
and,
to open.
Get from one place to the other, especially if you've used the slide gesture to map out your screen and you have an awareness of where you are when you put your finger down. In fact, you can get so good at it that you can pretty much put your finger dead center on an icon you're trying to reach without having to go fishing for it or having to go navigating to find it. It's almost like if you can get that good at mapping in your mind's eye, you really can help yourself out, save a lot of time by just getting to an icon very quickly instead of spending so many seconds trying to find it. That's the one thing about the slide gesture that can really be frustrating to me when I listen to people who don't use the flicking gesture, is they're kind of
Camera, web, help, remind, fitness, app, fitness, health.
and they're trying to
Double
find
tap
that
to open.
app. And then what happens is they find the app they want to open, but because they're sliding their finger around, by the time they go to double tap, they double tap and open the next app over. And then cursing ensues, and then they got to start over again. So it's really, again, as a trainer, I'm just giving you my advice. I never like to tell people what to do, especially if you're not my client. But, I just think that the flicking gesture is very underused and underappreciated. And it's very simple. You flick to the item, you stop for a moment, and then you use your good old double tap. Your single finger double tap is your go-to gesture. You're probably going to use it hundreds of times a day. If you're an iPhone user who's always on their phone, that is, you'll use it hundreds of times a day without even thinking about it. And it's really just a quick double tap with one finger. And obviously with the gestures, again, my veteran users will know this. You want to use the fingertip. You don't use a nail. You don't use a knuckle. I have some female clients I've worked with who have very long nails. I'm sure they look beautiful, but you don't tap the screen with your nail. It's just not going to work. You got to use the pad of your finger. And then the gesture to
messages, one unread message.
Open
double tap
app.
to open.
So it's just
messages.
Quick double tap. There is a way to adjust the tapping. If you're working with somebody or you happen to be someone who has maybe a little bit of, let's say maybe arthritis, or they have issues with the fingers, you can adjust the tap time, the sequence of the double tap, if you need to make it a little bit slower to have the phone respond to your double tap because you can't do it fast enough. I just worked with a guy recently that had that issue because he had he was a carpenter and a woodworker growing, but when he had sight, and he did a lot of damage to his fingers over the years. So his hand that he uses for the phone, for the gestures, he has a tough time double tapping quickly. So we adjusted the speed of the double tap, and it works a lot more effectively for him now. So you can change that in VoiceOver settings, and we'll take a quick look at that depending on how much time we got here. So that's, like I said, the double tap. That's your go-to gesture. That's going to be how you activate items, how you open an application, how you select a message in mail to read, how you select a conversation in the messages app if you want to review what people have said back and forth to you. So that's it. That basic combination of navigation and double tap are really like the foundation or the core of basic iPhone or iPad use. Now, keep in mind that these gestures work across all the iDevices. So, I often get asked, well, if I get an iPad, do I got to learn a whole new, series of voiceover gestures? And the answer is really no. There's some additional things that you can do on an iPad or that are more prevalent. Like, for example, we're going to talk about the rotor shortly. The containers navigation is a bit more prevalent in the iPad world as far as the way that the screen layouts go with that split screen view for the various apps like Mail and Settings and Messages and Calendar, where you want to learn to utilize the container navigation to make your life a lot easier. You don't run into that as certainly as anywhere as close prevalent as you do in the iPad world. Now, there's a couple of other gestures that I do kind of go over with folks. The 3-finger swipe to the left or the right to turn pages of the home screen.
Dictate button.
I'm
Double
just going
tap to start
home
dictation.
here.
Double tap with 2 fingers when fit. Messages. 2 unread messages. Double tap to open.
So I just want to go back to the home screen to demonstrate this. So the 3-finger swipe to the left or the right, instead of having to go to your dock,
music, Safari, mail, phone, page 1 of 2, adjustable.
Finding
double tap to open Spotlight. Swipe up or down with 1 finger to adjust.
Page turner sort of demarcates the line between your home screen icons and reaching the dock at the bottom of the screen. And when you're on the page turner, you can flick up or down to turn the pages. And obviously this will be affected by, how many pages you have. I only have 2 pages. My second page is all folders. I've created folders over the years. I've consolidated into 2 screens because it's just easier for me to deal with. But I've worked with clients that have 9, 10 pages. So the page turner is one way that you can turn, to quickly go to different pages, but you can use the 3-finger swipe to the left or the right.
iTunes Store. Bluebird is dead. Electric light or health watch. Double tap to page 2 of 2.
So I just did the 3 swipe to the left, 3-finger swipe to go to the next page. I'm going to do the right.
Home, page 1 of 2. Bluebird is dead. Electric light or VoiceOver XD7Z.
So
Settings.
for some reason, my focus is jumping into the status bar. And that was the last song I was listening to on my brother's Bluetooth speaker. I don't know why it's showing up here, but whatever. So 3-finger swipe to the left.
Page 2 of 2.
Swipe to the right.
Home, page 1 of 2. Bluebird is dead.
So there, and you can actually, if you want, you can go into your library. If you keep going to the left.
Apple Apps folder. Apple Apps folder. Page 2 of 2. Bluebird is dead. Electric light orchestra. Healthcare and fitness folder. Showing app library. App library. Search field.
So
swipe up or down to select a custom action. Then,
if you only have 2 pages of icons, is your library, your app library. If you keep going to the right from the main page, you go into your today view, which you can customize if you want to really make it work for you. I really don't do much with the today view myself, usually because I have my Apple Watch, and the complication that I use, the infograph, has all my main information that I'm interested in right on the watch. So I really don't have to use my phone to look at the weather that often, or my calendar events, or if I have any reminders, sports headlines, stuff like that, I can quickly look at my watch for. So the 3-finger swipe to the left or the right is turning pages. And this also works within apps that have multiple pages. You don't commonly run into things, or sometimes you have Safari where you have multiple pages. So, keep that gesture in mind. The 3-finger swipe up or down is how you scroll screens quickly. So for example, if you go into contacts.
Section index, adjustable, Zachary Abernathy. Page 1 of 37, page 1 of 37, page 2 of 36, page 3 of 36, page 4 of 36.
So I'm just swiping up with 3 fingers, and I'm pulling
page 5
up.
of 36, page 6 of 36, page 7 of 36.
So if I swipe down with 3 fingers.
Page 6 of 37, page 5 of 37, page 4 of 37, page 3 of 37.
It pulls them down. So again, it's one way to scroll through, something, an app or a series of screens in a very quick and efficient way. Obviously, with contacts, you can go through your contacts using the table index, or you can use the heading navigation from the rotor, which I find the most expeditious way to quickly jump through the letters of the alphabet and get to specific contacts. But again, to each his or her own, whatever method works best for you, then that's the one you use, obviously. So, but that's how the 3-finger swipe works, up and down. Let me just go home.
Contacts. Double tap to open.
I also teach people the 4-finger double tap if they're beginners. The 4-finger double tap.
Starting help. To stop help, perform a 4-finger double tap or 2-finger scrub or 2-finger single tap. Toggle speech.
Takes you into the VoiceOver help system, I guess you'd call it. It's kind of like the gesture help. If you've used a Mac, it's the equivalent of doing keyboard help with Control Option K, where you can practice your VoiceOver keyboard commands. In this help, you can practice your gestures.
1-finger swipe right. Move to next item. 2-finger single tap. Toggle speech. 2-finger double tap. Magic tap.
So, you can hear to make sure you're doing the gestures properly. And this is like if I work with people that are having difficulty with mechanics, this is where I tell them to go to really work out any of the issues, because you get immediate feedback from the gestures without causing anything to happen in the phone itself. So it's like going to the shooting range, or using a flight simulator. You're flying a 767 across country, but you're not really carrying 400 passengers with you if something bad goes wrong. So it's kind of the same thing, where you work on your gestures without affecting the phone at all. So that's one of the reasons why I point this out to folks. And then you can use the 4-finger
double tap to start help, stopping help,
to leave the help, or you could just use the home gesture, or you could just tell Siri to go home. So, either of those methods to get out of it, and it takes you back to where you were prior. Now, the other gesture or a feature I kind of wanted to touch on as a basic, because again, I think it's been sort of vilified by some blind people. I've talked to some blind iPhone and iPad users who can't stand it and don't use it or avoid using it at all costs. And then I have other people I've encountered that love it and think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And that's the rotor. And the rotor can be extraordinarily useful to you in so many different aspects of your iPhone life. I teach it very early in the training because I want people to practice and to understand how it works. As I go through the apps, I point out where the rotor, particularly the action menu, for instance, is very valuable to you. So for those of you not necessarily familiar with the rotor, I know probably this audience, most of you are, it's basically pretending to turn a knob or a dial with 2 fingers. So you literally, if you're familiar with the radio tuning knob prior to this, this newfangled, just touching the screens and stuff, we used to have to turn the knob to actually adjust the radio station on stereos and such. I still have a stereo that does this, by the way. So you put 2 fingers on the glass side by side, approximately, I don't know, half an inch, quarter of an inch apart.
Characters, words, speaking rate, 55%.
You can turn it either clockwise.
Words, characters, actions, activate.
Or back to counterclockwise. It's a circle. So the items are going to come back around again, regardless of what direction. It's just a matter of you understanding your rotor, and you might know in your mind's eye what's the fastest way to get to a specific setting. So you notice as I turned the rotor, it said different settings, and there was a little swish sound that you also heard. And there is also a visual little flash of telling you what the setting is that you've turned it to. Now, the settings that are available on the rotor are going to vary, and they're going to be based specifically on the app or the situation that you're in. So it's smart, quote unquote, in that it doesn't overwhelm you with settings that you can't possibly take advantage of in your situation. So for example, on my home screen,
headings, containers, language, speaking rate, words, characters. I'm
not going to see navigation for websites. I'm not going to see links. I'm not going to see form controls. I'm not going to see tables. I'm not in a text situation, so I'm not going to see the edit menu. I'm not going to see typing mode. So the settings that will appear or be available to you will always kind of be based on where you are when you're turning the rotor, and you take advantage of those settings when you need them. Now, most of the time, you flick up or down to utilize the rotor setting. So if I turn
actions, health, headings, containers, language, speaking rate, words, characters
to characters, if I flick down with one finger,
cap H E A L T H,
that's the
hotel,
health app. So I'm going character by character through the word health, the icon. And if I go up with one finger, flick up,
H T L A E, cap H,
it goes
hotel.
Backwards. So the words, characters, lines, these are settings for the rotor that you best use if you're proofreading or you want to have something spelled out to you, an icon or a part of a screen. But it's really valuable when you're proofreading a mail message or a text message that you're sending to somebody, and you want to make sure that you didn't make a mistake with typing or that dictation went south and you're sending something you really shouldn't be sending to people. So you want to use the rotor, for those types of situations. Now, there is one setting here I'm going to turn to.
Actions, headings, actions, activate.
The actions. Now, the actions menu is a little unique. The actions menu and the edit menu, when you're working with text, are the only two rotor settings that require a double tap to select something from the menu. Typically, when you turn your rotor, you flick up or down one finger to utilize or change a setting. But with the action menu and the edit menu, you have to double tap on a selection. So there's only two actions I can take on an icon on my home screen.
Edit mode. Activate, default.
So activate and edit mode. So activate is what it sounds. That's when you double tap on the item and it opens and you open up the messages app or calendar or whatever the case may be. Edit mode allows you, when we spoke earlier about dragging apps around, moving apps around, it also allows you to delete applications. So when you go into edit mode, the sighted world calls it jiggle mode, where the icons kind of jiggle on the screen and then you can drag them around from a sighted perspective. But from, the easiest way from the VoiceOver perspective is you just double tap.
Edit mode. Started editing.
So it says started editing. So if I flick down with one finger,
delete,
I could delete the app.
Drag health.
I could drag the health app. So if I wanted to move the health app elsewhere on my screen, I would double tap on drag. So I'm going to
messages is editing. 3 unread messages.
I'm just going to pick a random app here.
Maps is editing.
All right, so I'm
double
on
tap
Maps.
to add to drag. Now drops available. Swipe up or down to select a custom.
I could double tap to add this to the drag session if I wanted to do more than one app, but I can also flick down with one finger.
Stop editing apps.
Stop editing apps.
Add to drag session.
Add to drag session.
Drop health before maps. Drop ready.
Drop health before maps.
Drop health after maps. Drop ready.
Health after maps.
Create new folder with maps and health. Drop ready.
Create new folder. So if I wanted to make a folder for some reason and put those two apps in there, I could double tap. Now, if this was already a folder, it would give me the option to add to that existing folder. So you double tap on the particular choice that you want to make. So I'm just going to go
cancel drag. Drag canceled.
So I just wanted to cancel so I don't drag my health app around. So again, it's flicking up or down and double tapping on the option that you want to choose. Now, actions can be very different based on your different situation. So for example, if you go into mail,
doc, music, Safari, mail is editing. Alert, remove mail.
Oops.
Removing from home screen. Delete app. Remove from home screen. Cancel button. Cancel.
We forgot to get
Apple Apps folder. Add widget button. Done button.
Close that out. Let me go
doc, music, Safari, mail, 500.
All right, so let me just
mail,
go into mail.
Toolbar, checking for mail. Mailboxes, edit, button, all inboxes, heading, search field, dictate, button, unread, Tom and Dave, iDevices, prop.
Okay, so here's a 2-message conversation, for example, from the iDevices list. So if I check out this action menu, because when you go into most apps, the action menu is what the rotor sets itself to by default. So all I need to do is flick down with one finger.
Mark as read. Flag. Expand thread.
If I wanted to expand the thread to hear the individual messages that make it up, I could do that. More, which gives me the option to like reply, for example, or forward.
Read later. Drag item. Delete thread. 2 messages.
Or delete thread. So all I'd have to do, because this is the action menu, is I would double tap on the choice that I want to make. So, mail is going to present you with different actions that you can take on mail messages. The messages application is going to give you different options that you can take on a conversation or a part of a conversation that you might be looking at in the transcript, for example. So you always want to explore the action menu, because the actions you can take on an item really are going to vary based on where you are. And sometimes those actions can save you a lot of time. So as an example, if you have a piece of a message where somebody gave you, I don't know, the name and number of an electrician, or an address to a place you need to go, or maybe there's just something you want to that somebody said that you want to make sure you get exactly what they said, and you want to send it to a different person. You can use the action menu and simply double tap on copy. So instead of having to use the VoiceOver rotor options for text selection and stuff to copy, you can just double tap on copy. It copies the entire text from that particular part of the transcript, and then you can use the edit menu to paste that into a different message. So utilizing the action menu from the rotor really can be very valuable to you, in a variety of different situations. So sometimes it's really worth going through and looking at what actions you can take on items in various situations, because you never know, it might save you time. It might make a task that you're trying to do that much easier. And again, exploring the rotor, you want to see what rotor options are available to you. Now, the VoiceOver settings is a great place to poke around in. I'm going to get there.
Doc, mail, phone, page, file app, finance fold, blindness, extras fold, Apple apps fold, settings.
Double tap on
contacts,
settings
button.
I'm going to
settings, app store button. Private, battery, exposure, no, emergency, face ID, Siri and search, wallpaper,
to the left.
Accessibility, home screen, accessibility, button, vision, heading.
Okay, so we have accessibility. Now I'm going to flick to the right.
VoiceOver, on, button.
Ooh, there's VoiceOver. So we'll double tap on VoiceOver. Now, one of the settings I want to point out here.
VoiceOver, tap.
Going to be a little ways down here.
Speech, braille, VoiceOver, verbosity, audio, commands, activities, rotor, button, rotor actions, rotor, button.
So the rotor button will give you the ability to customize the items.
Selected, characters.
That
Swipe up or down to select a custom action.
Your rotor and allow you to customize. So you can add or deselect items that you either want on the rotor visible to you, or you want to remove from the rotor. So like, let's say, for example, visited links, non-visited links, you don't really care about stuff like that. So you can explore.
Reorder selected, reorder word, selected, reorder lines, text selection, reorder text select, selected, speaking rate. Swipe, reorder text selection.
So if you
swipe up or down to select a custom action,
rotor,
then double tap to app selected, text selection.
So it will say selected. So as you go through, it's either going to say selected, or it's not going to say anything if it's not currently on your rotor. So my point is, there's probably, I don't know, 30, 40 different items you can potentially have on your rotor, and you have the complete control over whether you want to have a very, sparse rotor with only the basics on it, or whether you want to have something that is very, large based on your situation. But always keep that in mind, that these items are only going to appear if you have them selected in situations in which you can use them. So they're not just going to take up space on the rotor and be there wasting your time.
VoiceOver, back button. So, VoiceOver.
And by the way,
rotor, button.
The 4-finger single tap at the top or the bottom of the screen is a quick and easy way to take you to the first item or the last item on a screen to save time. It's a little bit tricky to sort of get it down in the beginning because you have to kind of be very precise. But if you do it properly.
Double tap timeout, 0.25 button.
So that's the last item on the VoiceOver screen. And that was what I was talking about the double tap. You can adjust the amount of time between the taps and the double tap in that particular setting. But if I do the 4-finger at the top.
Accessibility, back button.
Accessibility, back button. So that takes you to the first item at the top of the screen here.
Accessibility. Vision, heading, VoiceOver, on, button.
Let me go back in the VoiceOver here.
VoiceOver speak, tap once to, double tap to act, learn more, VoiceOver practice, speaking rate, heading. Speaking rate,
where you
50,
can adjust
speech,
your
button.
speech. Now, speech button. People will often ask how you add voices, how you customize voices. That's the area you want to go. You can add rotor languages if it's not US English. But if you select the US English, you double tap on the current voice. So in my case,
Alex, button.
It's Alex.
Pronunciations, button.
So
Voice,
if I
Alex,
double
button.
tap
Selected,
on Alex,
English, US, heading.
It will then give me different options.
Agnes, button. Selected, Alex, Allison, Ava, button. Bruce,
I'm flicking
button.
to the right.
Eloquence, button. Evelyn, eloquence,
There's
button.
your eloquence. For those of you who are fans of eloquence, you can add eloquence, and you can either make that your default language or you can simply add it to the rotor, if that's something you want to do.
Speech, back button. Speech.
You want to add other languages.
Voice, Alex, add new language, button.
You have to go to the bottom of the screen and do the add new language if you want to add additional languages to the rotor. There are all kinds of cool things. If you really are a kind of a voice junkie like me, and you like to change your phone's voice and accent and just to entertain the masses, you can certainly do that. So I have the Irish, I have Scottish, British, Australian. I have a couple of different English voices. So I have different things selected and downloaded. Now, keep in mind that some of the voices do require a download. For example, Alex is approximately 900 megabytes if you want to use him on your phone. So, I don't know, obviously based on what kind of capacity you have on your phone, you might want to be a little careful about how many languages and what types of voices you want to download. For me, I think this is 256 gigabytes, so it really doesn't matter. I just downloaded the voices I wanted.
VoiceOver, back button.
So I'm going to go back
VoiceOver
here to the
Braille, button.
So we have different options here in VoiceOver settings.
Speech, button, Braille, button.
Braille for setting up your Braille display. For those of you who use a refreshable Braille display, that's where you can add your Braille display or customize, your Braille commands and everything else.
VoiceOver recognition, button.
So we have our VoiceOver recognition for the image recognition and application recognition. This has become sort of a interesting hot topic where some people think it's a waste and turn it off, and other people find it very useful like me, so I leave it turned on.
Verbosity, button.
Then they've kind of taken a page out of the Mac where you have verbosity settings,
audio, button.
You have audio
commands, button.
Commands. So the commands area allows you to actually customize some of the gestures should you want to add some additional functionality. Like for some of there aren't many, but for some of the gestures that are available to you, or if you want to change some of the more obscure gestures, you can do that, by customizing in the commands.
Activities, button.
Then you can set up activities, which again is something from the Mac world, where you can have VoiceOver settings that are specific to when you run apps or specific situations. For example, you can have a voice change. For example, I don't know why, I worked with a client from Australia not so long ago who she liked the Samantha voice, but when she was using DoorDash and Grubhub, she wanted a different voice. So we set up an activity just for those apps in which we chose the Australian voice for those particular apps. So, activities you can use, but just be careful with them, because, once you have the activity set, that's going to load when you go into that specific application.
Rotor button.
Then we have the rotor.
Rotor actions.
Rotor
Button.
actions.
Typing button.
Typing mode.
Quick settings button.
Quick settings. The VoiceOver quick settings is something new from iOS 15, where you can use a gesture. I don't remember if I changed mine, so I don't remember from the original default if it's like is it a 4-finger quadruple tap or something like that would open up quick settings. I changed it on mine. So it gives you some ability, and then you can use the
Selected
settings here
activities
to kind of reorder the quick settings, or
reorder activities. Selected. Always speak. Reorder. Always speak. Selected. Audio ducking.
So
Actions
you
available.
can turn off or add anything, just like the rotor. When I demonstrated the rotor before, if there's certain things you want in the VoiceOver quick settings, you can either add them or remove them, or you can, drag them around if you really are that concerned about the order of what the quick settings show up in. I'll be perfectly honest, I very rarely do the VoiceOver quick settings myself in my everyday use. But it's there should you be interested.
VoiceOver, back button, VoiceOver, rotor, button, rotor action, typing, quick settings. Quick settings allows you to access VoiceOver settings. Navigation style, flat, button.
And then we have navigation
Navigate
style,
images, always,
navigate
button,
images,
large cursor, off.
Large cursor.
Double tap to toggle setting.
They've really, the thing I really want to point out here is when there is a new version of iOS, you want to go into VoiceOver settings, because Apple tends to sometimes reorganize the settings. Sometimes things that you found in one place, guess what? They're not there anymore. They're in another place entirely. Sometimes they add new categories. It's always an adventure when you go in. It's just like going into settings itself. Just going into settings and looking for things that you may have seen, always found in the same place for years. All of a sudden, Apple has decided arbitrarily to either put them in a different setting or to move that setting elsewhere. So for a long time, for example, accessibility was actually under the general category in settings. And it was only, I think, in iOS 13, I think it was 13 or maybe 14, that they actually pulled accessibility out to the main settings list. So things like that, you always want to sort of take the time to go in and explore. And, this way you kind of learn where things are.
Caption panel, off.
So then we have
double tap to toggle setting, double tap timeout, 0.25,
double tap
button.
timeout. So, and I want to differentiate too between VoiceOver settings, and there are also the accessibility settings. So, you also can look at the accessibility settings. And one of the things that
accessibility,
I do want
back button, settings,
show you here.
VoiceOver, on, button, zoom, off, button.
So, for those of you who have low vision, you past the VoiceOver, you have zoom.
Display and text size, button.
Display and text size. Those are two important settings if you are a low vision user, because you can really customize and change the way your iPhone screen appears. And I'm not exaggerating, I've had 2 clients in my experience over the last 12, 13 years of doing this, who literally broke into tears because they weren't aware of these settings, and they just changed a couple of things, and it made them able to actually see the screen, 10 times better than they were prior. And all of a sudden they were able to actually use their phone, independently and comfortably. So if you're low vision, it definitely bears, a look in those settings.
Motion, button. Spoken content, button.
Spoken content for turning on, where you highlight something and you can have it read to you. It is not the same as VoiceOver. It's a one-shot deal. You highlight what you want to have read, part of an article or text message, whatever, and it will use one of the speech. Usually it's your default speech that will read to whatever is selected.
Audio descriptions, on, button.
Here's what I wanted to point out. Audio descriptions, it's on or off. If you turn it on, if you're a big fan of DVS, as I am, and you have Netflix, or you rent stuff from the iTunes store, or you use Amazon Prime, if the movie or TV show has an audio description track, theoretically, with this turned on, it should automatically start playing for you. You won't have to go poking around into the specific settings of that app to find the audio description. And I say theoretically because I'm sure somebody's going to come along and tell me, oh, I wanted to play this movie on this show on Hulu and the audio description didn't start, so I'm just saying in theory, it should work.
Physical and motor, heading, touch, button. Face ID and attention, switch control, off.
So face ID and attention, this is another thing I wanted to point out to folks when I was talking about setting up Face ID. You want to go in here and turn anything off that will help Face ID for a blind person. Obviously, if you can't see, you can't really look exactly into the camera. So if you just tweak some of these Face ID settings, you can really make it much easier for you to set up your Face ID. And, as I said, I kind of shake my head when I hear people telling me, oh, blind people can't use Face ID. They can't set it up. They can't use it. I use it all the time. And I set it up on my own. I've never needed anybody to help me. And I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination, I have a superpower or or anything like that. I'm a rocket scientist, because I'm not. I mean, I learned this stuff on my own years ago, and I can't tell you how many times, especially when I was trying to learn the gestures, that I wanted to throw my phone across the room and bounce it off a wall. So it took me a long time to figure out how to do this stuff on my own. So I am not by any means a savant when it comes to this stuff. My point is that if there's a will, there's a way, and you practice at it and you work at it, you can figure out how to do a lot of this stuff, because Apple has really taken the time and the effort to make these things accessible to us and to allow us as blind people to use the phone quite extensively in the same ways as a sighted person does. So a lot of these accessibility settings, though, are for other disabilities, but there's also a whole hearing section as well. I work with a lot of folks who, besides being blind or having visual impairments, they also require hearing aids or some kind of augmentative device. I've worked with totally deaf blind people as well. So, you definitely want to get familiar with the accessibility settings if you are you have multiple disabilities. One thing, though, I do want to point out to you, and this may be a point of contention with some folks.
Switch control, voice control, off, button.
Voice control. This, for some reason, has, for whatever I don't understand. There are blind people that thought this was like the miracle solution to everything, that this would keep them from having to learn to use their phone with gestures. It's like on the Mac, voice control, I don't have to use a keyboard. Well, I have some bad news. Voice control does not play nice with VoiceOver. If you play with it, you will learn very quickly that it is only really designed for a sighted person who has a physical, disability that prevents them from being able to use the gestures on their phone. I had a client very recently, a local client from Helen Keller. She accidentally turned on voice control. I cannot even begin to tell you the problems that this caused. And I can tell you from having worked with her and having to figure out what she did, voice control does not play nice with VoiceOver. Perhaps somebody's going to come along and tell me, well, I found a way to do it or whatever. That's great. But the average user, this is going to blow your mind and drive you crazy. I have turned it on myself just to mess with it, and it will respond to VoiceOver speech. It responds to anything that people say around you, especially if you're trying to, for example, dictate a text message or an email with voice control on. Oh boy, you can really get some interesting results to your text message. You will have more than you bargained for, and it will make you seem like you're having a psychotic break if you send it. So I'm just telling you from my personal experience, voice control is not the panacea for blindness as far as making you not have to learn how to use your friggin' phone. I mean, Apple designed VoiceOver for a blind person. you should really be able to use it as a blind person and not look for some quick, easy magical solution, to get you around it. Yeah, Siri definitely is. I'm not at all trying to detract from Siri. The thing is, I have a personal problem, I guess, or bias against people who come along and tell me as a blind person, I don't want to use gestures. I just want to use Siri for everything. Really bothers me because they're wasting their ability. And Siri can do a lot of things, but guess what you're going to find? She or he can't do everything for you. So ultimately, you are going to end up having to do gestures anyway, or you're going to have to limit yourself to what you can do with your phone, particularly with contacts. You can't create any new contacts with Siri. You can't delete a lot of things by way of Siri. You have to do it physically yourself. So there are a lot of things that Siri can do for you without a doubt, especially if you do some little research and you learn the value of how you say things to Siri, because sometimes just changing the phrase, the order of the words in a phrase can get you amazing results instead of standing there and cursing and saying she doesn't do a damn thing for me. Anytime I ask her to do something or I wanted to start something for me, she can't. Well, if you just take the time to sort of play with it a little bit, you'll be surprised what your results are. I spend a lot of time messing with Siri. I have a lot of friends with kids and my own nephews and niece that love to be entertained by the things Siri can do. So I've spent a lot of time playing with her and learning how to, really use the way I say things and ask questions to get some interesting results back from her. All you need to do is a simple internet search for Siri tips and tricks, or how to get Siri to do, A, B, C, or D, whatever. And there's a lot of people out there with YouTube videos that even though you can't see, you can still hear what they're saying and what the result is. One last thing I just want to kind of point out is applications. Learn your applications. Go into an app that you really want to use, learn its screen, learn the layout of the screen and all the things you can do. Because again, from the perspective of using your gestures, the mechanics and learning your gestures are the keys to the kingdom. If you can do the gestures, you can navigate screens and activate items and utilize the rotor effectively. You're going to be really surprised and thrilled by how quickly and efficiently you can do mail or messages or calendar or contacts. I'm really tired personally of reading stuff on the various email lists, the iDevices or the visual impaired iPhones list, where people constantly come on and say, calendar's not accessible. Go out and get fantastical. Go out and get this. Go out and get that. You can't use contacts. Get this, get that. Take the time and learn an application before you declare it inaccessible. Seriously. I don't understand why people just have to go and claim something's not accessible because they haven't taken the time and effort to really learn an application. I don't want this to be blurred or confused with third-party apps that are truly not accessible, because there are plenty of them out there that either are completely inaccessible to us or are partially inaccessible to us. Now, I happen to be a little bit more broader in my definition of inaccessible. I know there are some very strict and militant blind people that if one control, one button, one part of an application is not accessible to VoiceOver, they call the app inaccessible. To me, as a blind person who's lived for the last 55 years and has gone through a lot of different things, I've learned the value of working around and adapting. So sometimes I deal with third-party apps that others would consider to be inaccessible, and I use them well enough because I find ways to work around the inaccessible aspects of those apps to get the task done that I need to get done. That was the case in the beginning when DoorDash and Grubhub first came onto the scene, because they were not very accessible in the beginning, particularly Grubhub. So, fortunately, as the years have passed, they've gotten much better. They kind of, sometimes DoorDash and Grubhub break accessibility here and there, but for the most part, you can really do whatever you need to do. But back in those days, I figured out workarounds. I figured out ways to order food. I figured out how to, do things like that just with effort. just learning the app, playing with the app, knowing my gestures, knowing my mechanics, and just using good old engineering sometimes. And remember, you can label elements. There is a gesture that you can use that allows you to put a label on an unlabeled element, and it is saved by VoiceOver. So if you get sighted help to tell you what buttons do that are not labeled, or controls might not be labeled properly, you can label them yourself so that, you'll always know what they are. So, the more you get into understanding, and there's material in the getting started guide for iOS 16 that comes on your iPhone in the Books app. There's a lot of resources out there. My website, Matt and Cliff's website, the Tech Juggernaut. There's a lot of different places. Apple Viz, one of my favorite folks out there to go to for all kinds of help. I love those guys. Can't say enough good things about them, because that's a great place to learn about bugs for, when a new version of iOS or Mac OS comes out and you're kind of on the fence of whether you want to, take the plunge and upgrade. You can always check out Apple Viz. They always have detailed information, and there's a lot of users who talk about different apps and give advice on, like, if you're looking for an app that does A, B, or C, 9 times out of 10, you're going to find information on Apple Viz. And there's a lot of other resources out there. I don't want to leave anybody out. That's the great thing about, the whole blindness community, is the resources are there as long as you're willing to go look for them. So, I just, my point is that the stuff is out there. Even if you're a self-learner and you don't want to work with a trainer, you can learn a lot on your own just by, seeking out. It's not like the days when, probably when me and Matt and Cliff were learning way back years ago, where there was limited resources, and a lot of the stuff came down to us just either practicing and doing, or having a small group of us get together and sort of say, hey, did you know you could do this? I kind of consider myself one of the pioneers when it comes to iOS and Mac OS, because of the fact that we did not have trainers, we did not have tutorials, we did not have Apple Viz or anything like that out there to help us. We just kind of had to figure it out ourselves and share the information among each other. I open the floor out to any questions.
I was just curious. I think I missed the part where you were using the rotor and turning the dial to whichever of the menus you want to choose. How do you actually choose? When you turn the dial all the way over to actions,
then you flick up or down with one finger. So typically when you turn the rotor,
headings, containers, language, default, containers, language, default.
So if I wanted to change my language, for example, I could flick up or down.
English, US. English, Ireland.
Gotcha.
English, UK.
English, US, default.
So, and you can flick up or down. So typically that's how you change or you utilize. So for example, if you turn the rotor to words or characters or lines and you want to proofread a text, you can flick up or down to go backwards or forwards through the, the text message or the email message, and you can read it by words or characters. The only time, like I said, the only 2 instances that you have to double tap on something to select it from the rotor is either the action menu or the edit menu when you're working in any kind of text area, because the edit menu will have things like cut, paste, select all, copy, so there'll be actions that you have to take by double tapping on the edit menu to select them. So those are the only 2 instances that I've found that you really need to double tap. Otherwise, you just flick up or down. Like, for example, if you wanted to experiment with the typing mode, if you wanted to switch from standard to touch typing or touch typing back to standard, you can turn the rotor to typing mode, and then you can flick up or down to change the typing mode. And it wasn't really enough time, or, I wanted to keep things basic, but remember too, you do have the text selection capability for copying and pasting, specific chunks level. Let's say somebody sent you an email, or you're typing an email and you reread it, and there's a sentence in there that you say to yourself, oh boy, this person doesn't have a sense of humor. They're not going to get the joke. Let me just delete this particular sentence out of the email. So you can use the text selection option from the rotor to highlight that particular sentence, and then you can use the edit menu to cut it from the email message entirely. So when you become really efficient with the rotor, you'll discover that there's a lot of really cool things that you can do that will make your life that much easier.
Now, I've never been able to figure out what is the container. What does that actually mean, and how is that? What does it actually contain?
Because some app developers, and you particularly, this is a strong thing to use on an iPad. So containers are like chunks of the screen that are subdivided. So when you use an iPad, for instance, and you go to the Mail app, the visual the presentation of the screen is the top half is your message list. And then when you select a message, the bottom half of the screen shows you the message content. So if you turn your rotor to container navigation and you flick down or up with one finger, you can easily jump back and forth between the message list and the content of a specific message. So the iPad will do this like in Calendar, in Settings, in the Messages app, Reminders. So it loves this split screen sort of approach, and the container navigation makes it very quick, and efficient for us as blind folks to, quickly jump back and forth between those halves of the screen.
When I open a doc file, or it could be other PDF files, an extension, on the very bottom, there is a scroll bar that says this is one of 15 pages or something like that. And when I scroll on that, it doesn't really change anything. Can you tell me how to work with that?
It's supposed to. You're supposed to be able to touch the scroll area and then flick down to quickly cycle towards the end of something. Like, for example, let's say messages. So I have a bazillion messages in my Messages app, conversations going. So if I touch the scroll bar, let me see if I can, while we're kind of.
PM, weather, 47 degrees, sunny, hot 2:30 p. Weather, Tuesday 8.
English UK.
Oops.
English, us, speaking rate, 55%. 2:30 p.m. Status bar item, settings. Messages, 6 unread messages.
So,
messages, filters,
if I look
back
at the
button.
top of my
messages heading,
here,
more, button, compose, button, search field, dictate, button, conversations, Patricia, pinned. 80810, Cliff Miller Sr., unread, Jason Consolacion, unread, and if your proposed solution in.
So there's like at the top, but if I go to the scroll.
Vertical scroll bar, 19 pages, 0%, adjustable,
so
10%, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 9, 100, 100%.
Now, if I flick back.
Vaughn Jones, I'm on the vertical scroll bar. Vaughn Jones, David Life, no, Melvin Manikovusagam.
So these are all the messages at the bottom of my screen. So, using the scroll, like I will do this sometimes in news. If I want to get past, like if I look at MLB or NFL or NHL and the top of the screen is all like the current games and scores and such, and I just want to get to the news articles, I'll touch the scroll bar and I'll flick down to when it says like 20%. And then if I take my finger and go over to the left, I'm in the actual listings of the articles. Now, some of these apps, the scroll bar does not work. I have found some apps where you can flick until you're basically sore and you're not going anywhere. But most of the Apple apps, this works just fine. So I'm just going to
vertical scroll bar, 987, 60, 54, 30, 20, 10, 0%. Compose button. Search, dictate button.
So it gets me back to
double tap to start dictation.
Towards the top.
Double tap with 2 fingers when finished.
So, you can use the scroll bar, but just be very careful with it because you can, what happens to me sometimes when I open up messages, I inadvertently touch the scroll bar and it goes down to the bottom of my messages. So I'm looking for, the ones that I have pinned at the top, and I'm seeing message conversations from, 2 months ago, which is my fault because I should just really delete the conversations I don't need, but that's neither here nor there. But that's basically how you would use the scroll bar, and you can do this in Mail. You can do this in
messages,
Safari,
7 unread messages.
Anything,
double tap to open.
Anything that has a scroll area, that's typically how you would use it. Let us conclude.
All right.
All right,
Thank you,
guys.
John.
Thank you very much for attending. and I will speak to you guys later.
Remember, for all Mac, iOS, and any kind of Apple training, visit macfortheblind.com. John Panarese has some free courses and some reasonable paid courses. You won't be disappointed. See you next time.